Paying the rent. It's time to do a little thing called paying the rent. I'm talking about money, not trying to be funny, but I'm not going to ask you to contribute. Hey, everybody. It's the beginning of the month. It's time for everyone to pay their rent or mortgage or, do the chores around your parents' house. I don't know. I'm not judging your living situation. I live in an apartment right now. Do I want to live in an apartment? No. I mean, I'd rather live in a house, is what I'm saying. I don't want to be living on the street. That's a tough life. It's time to pay your dues. It's also time to pay your dues with me, Tom Lommel. I'm the creator of the Dungeon Bastard. I'm a master of Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm here to lead you through a fairy tale realm where heroes are forged with cold iron and fiery spells, and dragons are slain with your bare-knuckled fists. That was dramatic. I made that whole thing up off the top of my head, by the way. I just want you to recognize my improvisational skills. Very important for anyone who plans to run Dungeons and Dragons. So, just keep that in mind. I gotta be a little rude today, guys. I gotta leave my phone on. While we chat. There's some important Hollywood business that may come up in the middle of the stream. So, hey everybody, welcome. Let me, as BSB Cares so proudly puts it, let me lead you to the promised land. What is the promised land? It's Waterdeep. Yes, huh? Repping the merch. My wife got me this lovely shirt. I'm gonna start buying XLs because I'm trying to lose weight and it's sort of working, but they get a little busty. That's all I have to say about that. All right, so what is our agenda for the day? Today is, of course, our recap show. On Tuesday, I told you what was going to happen. Today, I come back and tell you why I was just hideously, no, that was wrong. I was mistaken. That it's not going to go like that at all. You may find out it went exactly as planned. I said what I was going to do. I set out to do it, and that's what I did. I executed the plan. Sort of. It worked. That's the premise of today's show, is our recap of what happened. So the very first thing we're going to do is recap the session. Share with you how events actually transpired. I'm going to talk about plotting the remains. The remains of the characters after that horrible TPK I had last night? Unfortunately not. No, I could have killed everybody, but I chose not to. I'm nothing if not a merciful DM, everybody. That's the takeaway here. Generous, talented, kind of spirit, handsome. It's a total package. Total package. We're going to plot the remains of the adventure. So what I'm looking for is kind of a roadmap going forward. Where are we going to end up? Adventures League has seasons. It has a definitive end. And I'm going to talk about matching up what the plot points are that are remaining with where we have slots on the calendar to make those things happen. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I will say I have been rather freewheeling with exploring the adventure, and at the beginning I added little bits in here and we went off track there and I rearranged some stuff here and there. Now that the end is in sight, it's time to be serious about, all right, how do we bring this thing to a satisfying conclusion in a way that feels climactic but doesn't feel rushed or forced. So, Disorganized Play is not live on YouTube, Donovan. None of our shows are actually live on YouTube anymore. We are Twitch partners. That precludes us from streaming to multiple services live. That means you catch it here first, and then later at some point, if you want to, you can go back and watch the archive on the YT. I understand this may cause some difficulties for you, but I'll be very candid just for a moment. Our YouTube revenue sucks. That's all I have to say about that. I think you are going to see much more Twitch content from us. Twitch exclusive content, I really don't make those decisions in the final end analysis, and I am not in the position to announce any further details of that stuff. But from where we're sitting in terms of trying to keep the show, we want to keep the show growing, and we want to keep it well supported. And Dom is doing a lot of work behind the scenes right now, especially on the tech side of things. And in order for us to help him on the tech side of things, we need to actually probably pay people some money to do that, because that job sucks. So in order to do that, we're looking at ways to make sure that our revenue stream is maximized and optimized for the... I mean, we're not going to do a bunch of ads and things like that, right? But here's the down and dirty truth. We have about 5 videos that make us money, and then everything else makes us no money. Like, we're not a channel that gets 3,000 views on a video 12 hours after we post it, okay? We just don't have that profile. So for us, it makes a lot more sense to push stuff to Twitch and help push, and push the Twitch subscriber model, which, like, even at $5 a month, which we do not get all of that, that way helps more than what we make off of putting all of our videos on YouTube. Let me be clear. I'm not in a position to announce anything. Secondly, I'm not saying we're going to go away from YouTube completely. I'm just saying we're live on Twitch. We're not live on YouTube right now. And a lot of that is because we're a Twitch partner, and a lot of that is because we're making the choice to optimize our experience for the bang for our buck. So there we go. Maybe my new bust. It's kind of new in like the past 5 years, guys. When you turn 40, it all kind of goes on you. You know what it was is we're so far off topic. I was really strapped for cash for a while. And I got very lazy about what I ate, and it was actually cheaper. Like, it was $5 to just pull in McDonald's, it was easy, fast, I didn't have to do anything. And then I put on a bunch of weight. And now I have changed my life and lost a bunch of that weight, but it's still a little bit there. All right, there we go. So, Flackwad, you're taking this bust thing to a whole different level that I am not going to repeat for the rest of the stream. Guys, you should have been watching on Twitch if you're watching this later, because Flackwad is putting on a show. Finally, I will take some of your questions and give you some answers. So if you have something about Dungeons & Dragons, that your game that you're having a problem with, or your DM that you're having a problem with, or just kind of any role-playing game in general that you're like, I'm not sure that this is working out, or whatever it is, I have years of experience to draw upon, and I'm always happy to share my enlightened opinion. So there you go. For what it's worth, you tuned in for this, you're getting it. Yeah. All right, recap of the session. Where did we leave off? What actually happened? So we left off, the party had just killed Duke Zalto. There were other fire giants that they had not dispatched, but they had killed the leader of the fire giants. Jorgen, the frost giant specifically, had finished him off, thankfully, because nobody else was doing damage to that dude. It was just like Jorgen and his great axe just slam, slam, slam. That was not cool. Like, the party ignored the big bad guys so that they could all focus fire on one of the minions. To this day, I've brought it up like 3 different YouTube videos in a row. Guess what? Guess what? Guess who's picking up my rent right now? Guys, it's the mailman. Let's see what happens. Gotta cut the stream when the mailman shows up. So that's where we left off. They had beheaded Duke Zalto. Jorgen had dispatched him and claimed domain over the rest of Iron Slag and the remainder of the fire giants. That was my out. They kill the big bad guy and everybody else kind of like drizzles away. Which, to be honest, like, this is a good technique, right? The big bad guy is the climactic hub of the combat. When that NPC goes down, it's a thrilling moment. It's hard to top anything after that. So you have a couple different options. Everybody either, sort of surrenders, drops out of combat, like, okay, let's stop and talk, let's go, let's parlay, let's RP, or we surrender, we recognize your superior prowess, whatever it is. Or you can kind of go the sly flourish route, which is everybody else ends up having like 5 hit points left, and they ended up getting popped in rapid succession after that. So it's not just one character gets the finishing kill and nobody else gets to do anything. Everybody else kind of gets to have a little glory in the massacre. Unfortunately, that's kind of the way to characterize it. So that's an option. Keep that in mind. When the evil necromancer gets cut down by the paladin, nobody cares that his orc warriors have 36 hit points left and they want to, but it's very anticlimactic to leave, even though the stats say those people stay in the game and fight to the bitter end or whatever. It's tough to make the rest of that combat have any sort of suspense to it, right? And if it does have suspense, it's weird suspense of like, oh, well, you know what? Then we almost got killed by the orcs. That was weak. That's anticlimactic when the minions end up taking the party out. So keep a lot of that in, keep that in mind. Know where the highlight of the combat is and end shortly thereafter. Go out on a high note. That's what we always say in show business. Tell your killer joke. Thank you, good night. That was my time. I gotta go. Boom, you're off the stage. No point hanging out. So, that's how I chose to address that situation. And you can definitely, as BSB Care points out, that you can play it off as a morale thing. Oh crap! If they kill the boss off, what are they going to do to us? They don't know how many hit points you have. You may look in bad shape. They don't know that you don't have a potion of superior healing or something like that. There's all kinds of plausible reasons for cardboard minions to just fold up and blow away. That's pretty poetic, you guys. So I hope that makes it in a little quote box. FQ, it's your job. Do your duty. So that's where we left off. I chose to pick it up pretty much as I described on Tuesday, right? So I was going to write up this big handout and, sort of evocatively narrate how things proceeded and whatnot. It's a little railroady to kind of just cutscene montage that portion of things. And I ran out of prep time, so I chose not to do that. I spent a bunch of prep time going through Iron Slag and listing all of the slaves that they could have rescued and all of the treasure that I thought was reasonable for them to recover from the Duke and Duchess's chambers and maybe 1 or 2 other places. So I ended up coming up with, there was a lot of essentially kind of bookkeeping involved there, right? So that's important. That's how I ended up spending a lot of my prep time. And also reading back into the Temple of, the Eye of the Allfather, the Temple of Anum. Doing some reading on, okay, well, what's supposed to happen here? How do they get in? What am I going to cut? Etc. So I did not have time to craft the finely spun prose that I wanted to spit out of the old brain maker. Oh well, that's fine. We ended up just talking through it. So I told them, Jorgen claims domain over the Fire Giants. The Fire Giants say, the ordning is broken. We don't have to listen to you. Before the ordning was broken, we swore our allegiance to Duke Zalto. But he's dead now. It's every giant for himself. We're going to go off and do what we want. And you can't do anything about it. We're going to grab our gear and go. If you got a problem with that, come talk to us. So, the players were a little full of themselves. They were like, oh, well, I didn't take that much damage. The dwarves took a lot of the damage. We could still fight these guys. And I'm like, There's 10 fire giants. There's another salamander. There's 6 more ogres. There's 20 orcs and 30 goblins. If you want to play this out, we can play this out, but it's going to take the rest of the night. Like, if you want to fight more fire giants, we have been fighting fire giants for literally 3 months. They got the message. So I said, in the meantime, you can loot the rest of the complex and kind of get things going. So we spent some time talking about the cash that they got. They got an insane amount of cash because they pried that 25,000 gold piece ruby out of the Voinendad Colossus, right? And so that right there, and I made sure, okay, the dwarves are getting cut in and Jorgen is getting cut in, and we're not going to divide this by 4 or 6 or whatever it is. So, disorganized. You mean this show? This show is fully improvised for the most part. I do prep a few things like maps and, oh, you know what? Speaking of, it's the recap show, you guys. You didn't even tell me I had the wrong title card up. Yeah. My Adventurers League game is not technically fully improvised, right? I'm running out of the book, guys. I got it right here. It's the book. I use it. I'm starting to play the adventure as written. So they, sucked up a bunch of treasure, decided they found the Eild rune and decided to divvy that up, and they found some other miscellaneous magic items, blah, blah, blah. We ate some time doing that. And then we spent some time talking about, okay, what are you going to do with the pieces of the Voinendad Colossus? Are you going to try and secure the fortress, or what do you want to do? They decided they're taking everybody back to Citadel Felbar. They got to tell everyone, okay, well, this is what's going on with, the Yak folk infiltration at Citadel Adbar, and this is what's going. They figured out that the Drow are going to try and capture the primordial elemental that's living in Gauntlgrim, etc., etc., etc. So they kind of gave a heads up on all these things that were happening, and they were awarded with the tower that's being built for them that's going to take 100 days to build, etc. So, BSB Care brings up the question, do I feel a little dirty when I play the adventure as written? There is part of my brain, right? As an old school GM, there's part of my brain that's like, that's cheating. That's the lazy way to do it. That's easy. On the other hand, I am finding a certain amount of joy in not having to worry about what's in this room or what's in this box, or make decisions about, is it more important for them to go left or to go right? Like, areas are detailed that I will never touch, and thank God, because it allows me to go, I like that, I'm going to steal that idea, I'm going to move them over there, I want to take them to here. It allows me to make decisions based on the content I like, rather than being forced into decisions. My problem is I dramatically underprepare for most of my games, and if I don't have a written adventure in front of me, then I really tend to just be flying off the cuff. And I think the game doesn't run as smoothly because of that, right? So it does feel like I'm kind of capitulating to a lack of creativity. I would discourage you guys from that attitude. I think it allows me, with my limited time or maybe limited attention span, to make informed choices about what's the most fun thing, rather than in making inventive choices about, well, what would be the coolest thing? Okay, well, that's cool, but how does that fit into, well, you know how that could be cooler? I like doing that, but it takes a certain dedication and a certain extra amount of time that I don't know that I'm committed to at this point. Little tangent for everybody. All right, so they go back to Citadel Felbar. Jorgen does inform them, okay, this ordning thing, he tells them about the ordning, basically that there's a pecking order to the giants, and that's enforced by Anam the Allfather, who's the god of the giants. And when it's broken, anybody could sort of curry favor with Anam and make themselves the top set of giants, right? So Friar Giants could move up the queue. It's unlikely Hill Giants would, but all of that stuff is possible, and it's chaos for the giants. And chaos for the giants means it's chaos for the small folk across the realms, because the giants will start screwing with people. And he also explained that, King Hecaton made this decree that giants should not interfere with the affairs of small folk, or at least not try to, reclaim lands from the small folk, because his wife loves the little people and doesn't want there to be, mass bloodshed, because the giants would just murder everybody. So that got communicated. And Jorgen says, well, what we really need to do is, my father told me of this temple called the Oracle of the Allfather, where we can commune with Anum and find out what's going on. So I can perform a ritual that will take us there, but it takes 36 hours. It costs, I've found this ring of adamantine that I can use as part of the ritual to create this teleportation circle. It costs 8,000 gold pieces. 36 hours, 8,000 gold pieces, and then I'm exhausted at the end of the ritual. But we can go to the place. Okay, they decide that's a good idea. They do that from Citadel Felbar, and we get transported to the Temple of Anum, the Allfather. So at that point, we have dispatched Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is done. Jorgen got his axe. They took some tentative steps to kind of dismantle the Voinendod Colossus. They got a bunch of fat loot. They gave the head of Duke Zalto to King Morin and Queen Tithmel. They got the reward for that. Chapter 8's done. We don't ever have to go back there again, hopefully, right? Assuming nothing awful goes wrong plot-wise and there's a reason to bring it back up. But that's taken care of. We move into Chapter 4. So they begin exploring, this part of it gets very dungeon crawly. I wish that I had gotten out the battle map, because it was very difficult to explain to them. Okay, you're in a 40-foot wide corridor. It goes 280 feet to the east. On either side for 120 feet, there's a set of 20-foot wide ledges that then are sort of perforated by 20-foot wide, 40-foot tall stone blocks that basically are little short hallways that lead to another hallway that runs parallel to the original hallway that is 360 feet long, ends in a room on one side and a portcullis. So you can see already, just from that description, it's not complicated when you look on the map, but it's complicated when you're trying to picture it in your head. And they had a lot of problems visualizing this. Now, here's the thing. You can't do it on a regular battle map because the scale is so enormous that it doesn't fit on a regular battle map. So you have to do what they did in the book, which is, okay, these are 20-foot squares. That's how they get the whole thing onto a page of paper. So that was an issue. The thing that's kind of weird is there is a set of portcullises that lead directly into the main area, the main temple area. There's the statue with all the giant statues around it and whatnot. Well, if you have gaseous form, or maybe you can reduce yourself, but the monk has shadow step. If he can see it, he can teleport to it. You can dim door, whatever. Or you could lift those portcullises. You can pop right through, portcullis, I'm not sure. You can pop right on through all of that stuff and bypass the whole, I have to deal with the door and whatnot. Now, I got rid of the Uthgardt Barbarian encounters. It was going to take too much time out of the session, and there was really no payoff for it, so I skipped it. Fine. They weren't missing anything. They didn't care. We didn't need a combat encounter there. They got into the main temple part of the complex, and they had no idea how to activate the portal. They did figure out, oh, the axe is missing. Let's go look for this axe. So then they start wandering around. Well, of course, the first thing they do is go to the north, and they started exploring those rooms, and they tripped off those traps, and the giant rolling stone boulder started doing piles and piles of damage to all of them. That was a little annoying because I was like, first of all, they split the party. 2 people are like, well, we're going upstairs. And the rest of the party was like, well, and 3 people were like, well, we're going down this hallway. And one person was like, I'm going to check out this statue. So, most boring name. First of all, there's a barbarian encounter at the steps of the temple, so I cut that out. But as you're going to find out, I did also cut out the barbarian encounters with the burial mounds. So they diddled around with the traps and did some searching and found some stuff, but not the axe. And so then they went back and they diddled around in the temple room. And Jorgen is with them, but he has told them, this is my first time here. I've never actually been in this place. My father just taught me the ritual to reach it so that, you know, I knew, because it's very clear that his dad's was royalty in the Frost Giant clans. He's like, I don't know what to do. Well, the module does not provide really any hints. There's no clue bat for this thing. You can't figure it out. They assumed like maybe any axe, you like put an axe or a weapon in the hand of the Frost Giant and something happens. Or maybe you cast magic on the runes and something happens, which was a callback to something that they had done in an expedition. They eventually go south, fight the Ramorhaz, get the axe, come back, and they diddle around with it some more, and finally it was very clear that they had no idea what to do anymore. And that's the point at which I, as the DM, have to make a call. How do we keep this moving? So Jorgen sits down, he meditates for 10 minutes, he prays to Anam for guidance, finally stands up, picks up the axe out of the giant's hands, goes over, touches the rune, and activates the portal. I don't like that solution, but that's the solution I came up with. If you were to run this encounter yourself, if you were prepping this yourself, I would strongly encourage you to think of different ways to make sure that they understand that a giant of the appropriate type has to take the appropriate weapon and touch it to the appropriate rune. That's not intuitive at all. Like, they assume because they're little people they can touch stuff off. So maybe, you know, Jorgen should have been more explicit about, this is a sacred place to giants. Small folk are not unwelcome here, but they are not, this is not a designated place for them. They are not equals here. That might have been a good hint to drop. I didn't think of it at the time. So they travel into the oracle. Here's the issue. I feel like there's a structural issue here that I want to reflect upon with you, and which I wish I had done some further reflection earlier, which is, as written, the party does have a giant with them. Harshnag shows up, right? So that's, as written, Harshnag is there, but he doesn't know anything. So they do have a frost giant with them to do this thing, but he doesn't know anything about it. And now that I think about it, I think maybe one of the reasons that Harshnag disappears at the end of it is so that they don't keep going back to the oracle and asking it questions, so that they can't do that. There's another point that I want to make. You go through all this like rigmarole, this sort of information vacuum. You've got the giant puzzle box, and there's no hints, no clues. How do you line up the colors and make the slidey levers shift into the proper places so they click, and boom, it opens up and gives you your prize, right? How do I push the button? I want the food pellet. How do I push the button? So you go through that information drought, and then when you solve it, you get into the oracle, and not only is the oracle there to answer your 6 questions, but there's the body of the dead cloud giant there who can possess people and tell you all about how the oracle works, and etc., blah, 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 right? So you've got 2 really, it's a double dose of information dump, where number 1, you're expecting to go in there and have to ask the Oracle about the meta plot and King Hecaton or the ordning and da-da-da-da, all of the things that you have personally learned. But you get there and you find this dead giant, and there's a ghost there who wants to tell you, that you're going to want to, who wants to talk to you, and that you're going to want to say, like, oh, how did you get killed? Do you know what's going on? What's happening? You want to interrogate that dude. I think you could mitigate, you really have a big swing here from no information to too much information, too many information opportunities, right? There's too many things that you can interact with in the Oracle room and not enough clue-bat type of things in the initial temple access room. So if I were to run this again, if I were to do this session over, I would strongly consider moving that body into the initial temple room. Who are you? How did you die? Well, my father went to the Oracle, and the two of us saw this guy, and or got these questions answered, and he learned a dark untruth that he was unhappy with. And the combat broke out, and I tried to flee, and he ran me down and slew me. Okay. Like, now at least you have something like you have a clue bat that you can kind of like, you can pump information out there. It's a ghost, so you can definitely have the whole thing of like, I'm trying to recall aspects of my material life. When I was mortal, what did we do to activate? You had to have, he took the morning star from the statue. What happens next is kind of fuzzy, right? So that's the thing. That's what you have that opportunity to give an unreliable witness, an information source, to the players before they go into the Oracle. Because the Cloud Giant Corpse doesn't really do you a whole lot of good in there, other than he tells you, oh, you have 6 questions, and you can only ask them once per day, and you have to go to this ring in the middle of the floor and answer this thing, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that's in retrospect, that's a big change that I would make. They quiz the, I'm Morgan about his stuff. He possesses Jorgen, so that kind of takes Jorgen out of the conversation, thank God. But he possesses Jorgen and talks to the party, and okay, now I trust you. I've learned Jorgen's memories, and he vouches for you, and you are trusted small folk, and you're clearly on the side of the giants. Here's how I died. You can have these magic items that I have on my body. I'm not attached to material things anymore. The only thing I asked. Now, so in the book as written, he asks them to go and murder his dad, get vengeance upon him, right? I did not want to give them that side quest. I was not sure how much pacing plotting that we had left, so I skipped that. Instead, he said, I want you to bury me in the clouds. It seems like maybe it's a tall order, but I think it could, I think there are some hooks there that could work. I have some ideas, actually. So, then the players, okay, you got 6 questions. What are you going to ask? You don't have to decide them all, but what are you going to ask first? So then they ask, why is the ordning broken? Anum the Allfather decided that his children had become too complacent. Okay. I think they said, what do we need to do to restore the ordning? And the book is a little weird about that, I believe. I think the answer, wrong section. The book says, find a magic conch of the storm giant king Hecaton. Use it to visit Hecaton's court and root out the evil therein. Okay, great. Where is the conch? How do we get this conch? What is Mixelplick spelled backwards? How do we get this conch? Jorgen knows the way. Alright, well, I've already decided that right there, Mr. Boring Name, most boring name, that's where I made the decision. I'm not sending them to the burial mounds. I don't see a point to that. So I skipped that circle of plot events and just told them directly what it was. So I just said Jorgen knows the way. Well, Jorgen's going to make them go probably to Svartborg, right, and hunt down the frost giant who killed his father. And that's what's going to come out next session. Is like Jorgen is like, I know where I know where the conch is. My father had it, and it was and as the ruler of the frost giants, it was his to hold. So whoever has usurped his position must now have it. Let's go take that over. So we skipped the whole Lithgard Barbarian Beorna's Well type of sub-quest. The next thing that they say is, what evil awaits us in King Hecaton's court? Now, I felt like this was giving, like, short-circuiting some of the suspense of the adventure to tell them, oh, here's the bad guy. I'm going to name them and explicitly point, put the finger on them so that you can go in and kind of not have to figure anything out, but just go make wild accusations. So I just simply said, a dragon. Okay. And that's, I've been playing up the rivalry, between the giants and the dragons and the long-standing war that they've been waging, etc., etc., etc. So that was a sufficient answer from my perspective. And that's basically where we ended the session. That was the whole thing. That they answered that, and we didn't even like RP. Okay, you leave the oracle. And we didn't have time, in the book is written, there's also supposed to be a dragon attack at the end of this segment. I don't think we're going to do that. It doesn't feel necessary, especially because as written, they're supposed to get some information from the oracle, go off and do some crap to get some giant relics, and then come back and he will tell them, okay, well, you go here and here and here to get the conch. So everything's. I feel good about where we're at with the pacing, and I feel good about how the session went. I wish I had, I ended up drawing the map for them. I wish I had I wish I had a laptop with sort of a fog of war that you could just reveal it. Okay, I'm going to swipe here, swipe here. You can see what's going on. Oh well, it worked out. It was a fine session. They got plenty of treasure and it was a decent change of pace from the combat-heavy session that we had previously. So, and they learned a ton about what's going on. So I felt like we advanced the plot. They got to do a little bit of dungeon crawl exploration. There was some puzzle solving, which wasn't wholly satisfying. But I think the fix that I talked about earlier would help address that. They got to do some, epic supernatural stuff. They got to meet a ghost and talk to a ghost. Not bad. I felt like it was a decent session. It accomplished the things that I wanted to accomplish, and I will also say I largely stuck to the plan that I laid out on Tuesday and managed to keep this whole chapter to one session, right? That's what I wanted to do, was keep this short, concise, dump the info I needed to dump, and then let's get them moving on a path to making something happen. Puzzle solving, you're right, Mad Pagan, very often does not feel satisfying, and I could go off on an entire rant about that, and a big issue with it is how you hand out clues. And another big issue with it is there are players who like to solve puzzles, who are naturally challenged and intrigued by the intellectual test that's put to them when they have to solve a puzzle. But there's also a bunch of people who just like to sit down and roll dice, and they go, I'm a 10th level wizard. I have a 20 intelligence. Yeah, I got a 21 on my intelligence check. Can't can I just solve the puzzle? Well, that's not satisfying for anybody, but it gets the situation over. So we could have a long discussion about the dangers and the tips and tricks that you could use in introducing puzzles. The other piece of it is introducing them in an organic way. This is a very classic organic type of situation where there's an oracle and they want to protect it from anyone using it, and therefore there's some sort of hoops that you have to jump through in order to activate it. So I didn't feel like this kind of puzzle conundrum was just dropped in out of the blue. It didn't feel artificial, but it was frustrating for the players to have no idea and no other information that they could go to and do more research on to get more hints. This is a puzzle that has no hints other than the circumstances of the puzzle, right? You see a set of statues. One of them is missing a weapon. There's a portal with a set of runes. Like, I could repeat that 13 times, and it doesn't help them at all. So it doesn't give them any additional information. So that's what you're really looking for is in a puzzle type situation is how can I feed them clues and hints that keep the adventure moving and gives them things to experiment and probe with without outright handing them the solution. Or the flip side is just like stonewalling them and boring everybody to death and making them want to rely on the mechanics to solve it. So, yeah, Mad Pagan makes a really great point here, which is the more that the players have to figure out on their own, the less that they want to actually figure out on their own. It's a little bit like writing a term paper, where you're like, if you're given a wide open topic that you could write about anything, you get a little bit of analysis. It feels like an uphill battle to start that. Oh, I could write about, all right. If you said, I want you to talk about the Whig movement in America and what it means, oh, okay, well, like, assuming you're interested in history, you research that, you have ideas about that, da 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 da. So the key to being a good dungeon master in any sort of situation, whether it's combat or role-playing or exploration or puzzle solving, is information control. Your job is information flow control. And in this particular case, you could crank the valve wide open and you could bang on the pipes and there's no more information that's going to come drizzling out of there. You got to find, I had to improvise a way to make that happen. All right. So let's, yeah, Christian points out that there's a difficult balance between engaging the creativity of the players and then emulating the innate abilities of characters who are native to a milieu and who may be smarter or more charismatic than the players. And that's definitely true, right? So, my character is actually smarter than I am, or my character has a 20 charisma. You can talk anybody into anything. Well, let's put some limits around that and have some ideas about what that means. And you at least have to give me, I'm not asking you to act. I'm asking you to tell me what specific circumstances or social levers the character pulls when they put on their act to help you succeed in this role, right? So that's something to think about. That's something to think about. All right, so plotting the remains. I'll just cover this briefly. I have kind of a hard out today. Around 3 o'clock, I will be over at the Geek and Sundry doing Bearded Men, the improvised campaign, D&D, the improvised campaign. So I can't go a little extra despite the fact that I would love to. But I went through the rest of the book. Here's my assumption. I assume that Adventurers League, the current season of Adventurers League, is going to be over at the end of March. So I looked at the calendar. That gives us 8 sessions from here to the end of March, and that's it. It's over, right? All right, so we are technically we are this far into the book, and we have this far left to go. Technically, not truly, because a lot of the rest of the book is different giant subquests or side quests. So they're modular in that respect, right? But I wanted to sit down with the rest of the book and go 8 sessions. Now I need to actually start pacing the rest of the adventure and figuring out what needs to slot in and what not. And I looked at the big plot points and the things that need to happen, and I believe I have approximately 6 sessions worth of material and encounters to get through to keep the action moving and compressed and okay, right? So that's good. That's a good place for me to be with 8 sessions. It gives me some wiggle room, gives me some squish, gives me some, I got sick this week, I had to cancel out, whatever the issue is, right? So that's good for me. I will say, when you sit down to do this, it's important to look at the book in terms of, or the different chapters, the remaining chapters, the remaining material that you have. It's important to look at it in terms of how does the plot develop, okay? What happens here? Do not look at the page count or the number of rooms or whatever, because particularly in very critical junctions of the adventure where the NPCs and the PCs interact with one another and bend the plot in dramatic directions, the rooms around them, who cares? Okay, they don't matter. I look at, like, so let's talk about, just to go back for a minute, to Iron Slag. My party spent a lot of time eradicating threats in the Yak Folk Village and explored every single room in the Yak Folk Village. They explored 2 rooms, technically like 3 rooms, in all of Iron Slag. They got in the elevator, they rode it to the bottom, and they walked into the workshop. Like, those are the only rooms. There was one other room that I described. 4 total. Okay? But the developments of the plot that happened there were crucial and climactic. They capture the Duchess, they bargain for her life, negotiate safe passage, and then betrayed Duke Zalto and slew him. Okay, great. Met Pagan! Thanks for subbing. So that's important, right? I had all of those other rooms prepped, those 18 other places. Like, I had an idea what was there and what kind of forces and what sort of reaction, and if there was a fight broke out, whatever. But you know what? I didn't use any of it. So when you look at the remaining material, it's easy to go, oh, God, we got like, oh, I'm looking at this. We've got, 60 pages of stuff to get through. How am I going to do that? And no, plot out the events. Figure out in your head, okay, what's the key decision? What's the key thing that they discover, or the key decision that they have to make in order to advance the plot, and where might that lead them? Okay? That helped me tremendously in going, I think if we have a targeted session that's mostly role-playing, we can do this entire chapter in 1 session. I think because blah, 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 because of things that I foreshadowed before, or I think if this doesn't turn into a combat and we make this NPC friendly, or at least open to parlaying, then we can tackle this chapter in 1 session, da-da-da-da-da, right? So that was my approach in sitting down, kind of finely slicing what not finely slicing. Let me back up. I did not finely slice this. I chunked it, okay? Eyeballed it. Here's what happens. Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah, if that's the way things work out, assuming that they don't start a fight, moving on. I see this. Could be some intrigue. We're going to have to hunt somebody down. Yeah, that's 2 sessions. All right, I'm going to eyeball that 2 sessions. Okay. Now that I have a general idea, and I'm giving myself 1 session slop to kind of move the line on this thing, I've got a row map. So I'm looking just to kind of finish this out. I'm looking at 6 sessions. They're talking about, today it came up, they're like, you know, if we just did 1 secret mission, we would be able to procure items from our factions and do, you know, get some extra magic items, which, like, I understand they want to do that because they can pick from a menu and control what items they get, but also I'm like, guys, do you not get, you don't get enough, so this is the balancing act of Adventurers League, is they've gotten plenty of magic items, they just haven't gotten the magic items that they want, and I can't give them the magic items that they want, that I know they want, because it's Adventurers League. So this is where players get like super greedy in terms of, oh yeah, no, how can I buy that? The other thing is that they have a ton of cash. Like they each have over 5,000 gold pieces right now, and there's nothing for them to spend it on. How many potions of healing can you buy? 50 potions a pop. Like, too many. So we may slot in an expedition, and I may attach that to the idea that, you know, Eigenmorn has asked them to bury his remains. So it may come up actually next week. We may go off and do an expedition. But that will give us 7 sessions plus 1 session to do kind of like a slop kind of thing, and that gets us out to the end of March. So we're looking at having 25 sessions of this thing total, which I feel is a little tight in terms of we could have explored far more, but it feels pretty on in terms of what time we have left. I don't think it's going to be too rushed, or it's going to feel too forced in terms of how the plot unfolds. Hopefully, I'm right in my estimations, but if I'm not, I've got 1 session of slop to fine-tune things. The other thing that this allows me to do is, if we end a chapter in the middle of the evening, I know, okay, I'm cool with picking up the next thing and moving on. I know where I'm going to go. Whereas a lot of times with this, you know, up till now, I was like, we'll just kind of feel our way around until we get to the end of the chapter, and then once that's done, that's kind of the end of the session for the night. We'll pick something else up the next time we play. Like, I'll find a way to pad it out. Now I have, you know, I have a very good roadmap of how I want to, not like a detailed roadmap, but I have a good idea of how I want to proceed with the rest of the adventure. All right. So BSB Care asks the question, what do you do if your party unintentionally slows things down? So my return question to you would be, what do you mean by unintentionally slows things down? Do you mean out of game chatter, following red herring or irrelevant leads, or they're just sitting around and maybe like enjoying the moment too much and doing too much role playing, or they're not in a hurry to jump on the plot, or whatever it is? Like, if I had time, I'd try and answer all 3 of those things, but which one is the one that you're specifically referring to? Waiting for that stream to catch up. Now, starting a fight with a bad roll. Slows things down. Starting a fight with a bad roll. So that's just bad luck. I'm not sure what to do about that. But you want to talk about red herrings. So my advice with red herrings is, I want to go back to a concept that I talked about earlier, which is Schrodinger's clues, right? You as the DM are the final arbiter of the importance and the truth of any given piece of information that the players have. Other than maybe like, what's the name of my character and what ability scores do I have, right? Those are facts that are immutable and agreed to be out of the domain of the DM's manipulations, although you can always, boost it if you want. So Schrodinger's clues, for those of you who are new to the stream, is a concept I introduced which says you fish some information out to the players that has the potential for something, right? Has the potential for some sort of plot implication, but is not explicitly stated as being, this is the plot implication of this thing. So, for instance, one of the players might find a ring with a seal in it, like a wax sealing ring, some sort of signet ring. Okay, that could be the signet ring of a long-dead nobleman who does not matter to the campaign anymore. It could be the stolen signet ring of a prince of a foreign land who was murdered while he was traveling abroad, and anyone who has this thing can sign orders on behalf of the lost prince who has been replaced by a doppelganger. You can kind of hint around Schrodinger's clues. My idea of Schrodinger's clues is you can hint around this thing if you want, until such time as it becomes important to definitively decide this ring is meaningless, it's just a neat trinket with some descriptive flavor text, or it is the clutch thing that you need in order to convince the guards that you are a member of the ambassador's retinue and that you absolutely must be let into the royal ball that's happening this evening. Okay? So, that's something that I encourage you to drop into your game, and that's something that I encourage you to also play with the dials on that. Okay? I don't think, I think you're allowed to say, it's a very nice ring, it looks fancy, you enjoy having it, but ultimately you run into a sage as you're traveling through the city who inspects it and says that it's really of no use to anyone living anymore, etc. It's a long lost kingdom, and it doesn't really have no one takes this it doesn't carry any authority anymore, right? That's also kind of a plot thread that you have dangling out there that is like, oh, well, when you could use this thing to open the seal on a long-lost tomb that's attached to that civilization, etc. But the important thing here is a red herring is only a red herring because you have decided that it is. If you're practicing what's known as island-style plot structure, the way that works is the players start over here with the inciting incident, and then they can travel to these little islands of information. Oh, they follow the letter that was left at the crime scene. They follow up on the rumor of the bald woman who was spotted leaving down the alleyway. They follow up on the receipt from the alchemist's shop that was stuffed in the pocket of his tunic, right? And then from, they could go to any of those islands, but the important thing is, okay, the bald woman works at the alchemist shop, or she works at the alchemist shop, and she has been hired by a very important client in the nobility. Both of those clues end up kind of leading you to the alchemist shop and leading you to the idea that this noble is trying to brew some sort of virulent poison. The point being that you can connect these things, find connections from these things. So if your players are if you feel like they're slowing down the action, if they don't think they're wasting time, then it's incumbent upon you to consider the fact that maybe they're not wasting time. If they find this particular thing meaningful, and it was never meant to be meaningful, you are under no compulsion to follow the letter of the module and go, guys, why are you obsessing over this goblet with this stamp in it? I just threw it in there because I had to describe the treasure. It doesn't actually have any connection to the noble who's, no, the goblet is one of the poison delivery mechanisms, and when they inspect the goblet, they find out there's a weird residue, da-da-da-da-da. So you're allowed, your job is to dispense information. You're allowed to fabricate that information. As long as it makes logical and plausible sense, it's not a red herring. Like, the easiest thing to do, in fact, as a DM, is to flip a red herring from a distraction that doesn't mean anything, that's meant to take you away from the main plot, to a crucial element that actually leads you to the next part of the plot. That's the whole thing of the red herring, is people follow them because they think it's an important connection to the rest of the plot. Well, in this case, you were right. Congratulations, players, you did it. Okay? Now, I will say it is difficult to come up with those connections on the spur of the moment, off the top of your head, especially when you think it's a red herring and then they spend so much time on it that you're like, oh my God, you guys. So I would challenge you to use some island plot development, plot structure. I would challenge you to use some improvisational chops to think of connections and maybe be writing down some possible connections to what you want, how you want to move the plot in whatever direction picks it up and lifts it. I would encourage you to pay attention to why they're so invested in this thing and what you did, because you probably did something. There's some association that makes them go, well, this is important. This is why. So think about that. Now, that's the deft, expert level dungeon master move, is I shuffle some things behind the screen, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and you never even know that thing was garbage. You were never supposed to go on that quest. You did not know that frost giant was never even in chapter 1 of the module. The more direct approach is to just straight up tell them. There's a way to mitigate this besides just going, guys, there's not a lot of information here, and I have to tell you, in the interest of time, you're not going to get much more information, so let's move on. That's the heavy-handed approach. You can just slam that out there. My suggestion would be to call for some knowledge checks or some perception checks or call on some history checks, and then use those mechanics within the game to feed them clues that nudge them away from the red herring aspect and toward whatever actionable piece of information you need them to take away, right? So that's the big problem with a red herring, or with this sort of like sit around and I don't get it, why are they spending so much time on this thing, is that if the information is actionable, then nobody cares that they sat around for 35 minutes and like tinkered with the weird gnome artificer's wind-up toy that you ended up putting a little detail on that they are now convinced it's some sort of like bomb mechanism or something like that, right? So that's sort of the path of, if you can't deftly reveal and change your plot to reveal information that's actionable about the red herring that they're spinning their wheels on, then I would suggest use the skill mechanics available to give the players some friendly DM clue-bat nudges of, okay, here you go. Now, so I would say, okay, make a knowledge history check. Okay, 15. Great, here's the thing. You remember from your old mentor, he brought in a weird wind-up toy like this, and he told you that they were specifically frivolous items that the gnomes created in the worship of their god of joy and frivolity, and that they're deliberately crafted as religious emblems or religious icons that are not supposed to have a specific or hidden purpose. It's actually sacrilege to create one of these things and have it pass messages or act as a detonating device of any kind. The joy of purposelessness itself, the sheer frivolity, is the only reason to create these things. Well, all right, well, now you've painted a bigger picture of the world, which is interesting, and given some insight into gnomish culture, but you've also very directly, but in a kind of a even-handed manner, told the player you're wasting your time. But you've made it fit within the confines of what their character knows, what the greater world is like, why it works this way, why you would know that. It's all plausible. Okay, oh, all right, my character knows that. Great. It goes back to, like, make the characters smarter than the players. The characters, not necessarily smarter, the characters have more information because the characters live in the fantasy world than the players do. Players don't like to invent world building and detailed pieces of lore and culture about the world. In traditional Dungeons & Dragons, that's strictly the purview of the DM. Don't touch my job. You stay out. The world is over here. You get to come around and kind of dance around in the pieces that I will show you, but you don't have to get across this line unless I open it up for you. You don't get to walk through the castle gates unless I lift the thing, right? I don't 100% agree with that. I think I think the other players at the table are also creative individuals who have something to contribute, but I understand that's a delineated boundary of Dungeons & Dragons and the storytelling mechanism. So it's incumbent upon you to use your power as the DM to kind of sideways empower the character's knowledge and then use that to send the message to your players of, okay, here's why this is a red herring and why you don't feel like the assumptions that you're making and the conclusions that you're drawing are wrong and counterproductive. Players can be wrong. That's fine. In improv, we always talk about yes and. You should yes and this, yes and that, and always accept ideas. You don't have to always accept ideas. In good improv, you see people get into arguments. But what they're arguing about is not what's important. It's their relationship that's important. So keep that in mind. You can straight up just tell them, guys, you've spun on this, you've wrung every piece of information out of it you can possibly get right now. Barring going someplace else and doing something else, you're not going to get any more information. Just have that metagame discussion. Sometimes that's the fastest, quickest way to dispatch this whole situation. So those are your three main options that I can think of off the top of my head. I hope that helps. So a red herring traditionally means that a red herring is something where it's a plot hook that actually misleads the party. It takes them in the wrong direction. It distracts attention from the actual villain or the actual plottings and evil deeds that are underfoot. That's my quick definition of a red herring. I have to get going, guys. I think there was one other question here. Most Boring Name asked, do you ever encourage players to write lore before the beginning of the campaign to incorporate it later? I have done that. I do. I will close on this brief story, okay? And probably one of the best things that I ever did in terms of a campaign character development session. Because that's really what we're talking about, right? Is like write lore that you can incorporate that, you know, reflects the player's interests and their, you know, their play style and flavoring and whatnot, right? Like maybe you have some guy who's really into, you know, some people are Lord of the Rings people, some people are Harry Potter people, some people are, you know, Thomas Covenant, blah, 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 like whatever. Point being, that one of the best things that I ever did was I said, okay, this is the start of the campaign. This is the premise. You are all part of an elite unit that is involved in the ongoing battle between the forces of Furiandi, the forces of good, and the forces of the Temple of Elemental Evil the first time that it arises in Greyhawk. Okay? We know from Greyhawk history that this battle takes about 2 years. We know that the temple is ultimately put down, and that the forces of Furiandi are victorious for the meantime. With that in mind, what happens to your character at the end of the war? 2 years from now, how is your character improved? How have they changed? Is there a particular outcome, or have they been particularly affected in some way that's maybe detrimental to them or causes them to be dramatically different? Have they lost an eye? Have they lost a limb? Do they have PTSD? Do they have a signature item or magical ability that they somehow now wield? And finally, what deed are they most known for having come out of the war? Is it a glorious deed? Is it an infamous deed? So essentially what I said was, you know, in 2 years from now, number one, we're assuming your character survives the war. But, you know, let's say they're 10th level. What do they look like? What has happened to them? Let's project forward and say what sort of signature events have they endured? Whether it's something as simple as they've lost their pinky, to they are now the most renowned thief, and they serve, you know, in all of Furiandi, but they serve as a special advisor to the Furiandi special forces. They teach commandos stealth, trickery, deceit, undercover spy techniques, etc. Da 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 da. Like all of those things. And you know what? It takes so much of the work off of me as the DM and allows me to just like soak in. These are all of these cool ideas that the players have. This would be cool. This would be cool. But and yet you paint it with a broad enough brush that you're not asking, hey, what magic item do you get next session? They might, you know, you might say, oh, he's an advisor to the High Magister for the Archduke of Furiandi, and he has a Staff of Power. Okay, well now I know that there's a quest line somehow, or a plot line for that guy to get a Staff of Power. But it's not, oh, guess what? I went into a hollow cave and fought 4 goblins and found a Staff of Power. So that's a piece of world building, and actually, you know, that's campaign and structure and plot and character building that you can turn over to the players, and then your job is to take those goodies in and reincorporate them and kind of put your own spin on them. And I'm not saying you have to follow what they say to the letter of the law. It doesn't have to end exactly as they predicted, but it definitely gets the players engaged, excited, forward-thinking, goal-oriented. Yes, I want this guy to be the best thief. I want him to be recognized. But I also want him to have betrayed one of his comrades in arms. Wow, okay, I've got a great story that I can build there. I just have to set up the elements and wait for that, give the opportunities for that moment to happen. All right, guys, I said I had a heart out. I went way over my time here. I'm 20 minutes past. It was a great discussion today. I will be back on Tuesday with more Storm King's Thunder. We'll see more Disorganized play. We'll see where I go next. Let's take a quick look at the calendar. Tonight, Gaurav Gulati is playing some video games. Tomorrow night, Mr. David Crennan is running Star Wars Edge of the Empire. Never tell me the odds. Saturday, you got Phoenix Dawn Command at 5 o'clock. Big note, no masks there on Saturday. And finally, on Sunday, hey, catch up on the YouTube channel. All of our shows eventually, right now, float their way over to YouTube, and you can catch up either on Tuesday's prep session, today's session, what have you. So 1 hour from now, I will be over on the Geek and Sundry, doing D&D The Improvised Campaign. I hope you'll tune in on Twitch and watch that. That should be fun. It's always a good time. Today's hero is Cade Stormcross. So you'll see Mr. Paul Vanosic in the hot seat, surrounded by the talented troupe of Bearded Men West and DM'd by yours truly. So with that, I hope you'll tune in. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, especially everybody who's pledged on our Patreon. It's a new month. It's a new time. I'll be cooking up some more goodies for you to drop in the Dropbox folder for you. And Christian, thanks for blogging about us. Everybody who's spreading the word. And I want to thank Farquad for modding for us, as always. Thanks for your time and dedication and speed with the links. So that's it for this week's Disorganized Play. Until next time, let's dungeon! Oh, wait, hang on. On Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, I will be running Dusk City Outlaws. That is the new game that is being kickstarted right now by Mr. Rodney Thompson. I got to play in an actual play before the Kickstarter got put together. You can go over to scratchpadpublishing.com and check that out. I will be running a game on Tuesday night, so the calendar isn't out yet, but pencil yourself in for Tom Lommel doing a little story-driven gaming Dusk City Outlaws. It should be intriguing. It'll be a great look at a brand new game that's being kickstarted right now. So I want to encourage you to tune in for that. Until then, let's dungeon. I got it right. I got it right. Paying the rent. Paying the rent. I got it right. I'm going to pay the rent.